me to provide a piece of music for today's service. And I said, okay, no problem. I'll know in a couple of days. I'll let you know what it's going to be. And Monday went by, and Tuesday went by, and Wednesday went by, and I could not for the life of me figure out what I was going to sing. And then I was talking to my husband about it, and he said, and I told him the nature of the service, and he said, well, you should do Water from Another Time, obviously. And I said, oh, duh. So I'm going to do Water from Another Time, which is a song by John McCutcheon, and it's kind of about grandparents. New mown hay out in July morn, grandkids are running through the knee-high corn, sunburned nose and a scabbed up knee from a rope at the white oak tree. Just another summer's day at Grandpa's farm with Grandma's bucket hanging off my arm. You know the old pump's rusty, but it works fine, primed with water from another time. Don't take much, but you gotta have some. The old ways help, the new ways come. Just leave a little extra for the next in line. You're gonna need a little water from another time. Tattered quilt on a goose down bed, every stitch tells a story, my grandma said. Her mama's nightgown, grandpa's pants, and the dress she wore to her high school dance. Now wrapped at night in those patchwork seams, I waltz with Grandma in my dreams. My arms, my heart, my life entwined with water from another time. Don't take much, but you gotta have some. The old ways help, the new ways come. Just leave a little extra for the next in line. Gonna need a little water from another time. Newborn cry in the morning air, past and the future are wedded there. In this wellspring of my sons and daughters, the bone blood of living waters. And though Grandpa's hands have gone to dust, like Grandma's pump reduced to rust, their stories quench my soul and mind like water from another time. Don't take much, but you gotta have some. The old ways help, the new ways come. Just leave a little extra for the next in line. Gonna need a little water from another time. It don't take much, but you gotta have some. The old ways help, the new ways come. Just leave a little extra for the next in line. Gonna need a little water from another time.
Tracy, that was beautiful. You made me cry. I hope you're happy. Now we're going to begin our reminiscences about grandparents and elders who have had a significant influence in our life. And we have some people who have already volunteered and are ready to go. If anybody else wants to make a contribution, please just let me know when we're through with the people who originally volunteered, and you'll be more than welcome here at the lecture. Now, Judy, first.
Good morning. Oh Lord, I hope I remember to put it in here. There it is. I brought my Kleenex. I have never stood in this pulpit and not needed Kleenex. So I will leave it up here in the event that I don't go through it. Now I'm going to talk to you about George Crabtree, my grandfather. He was a gentle, patient, compassionate, loving man, and he was a 30-year veteran of tough inner-city Boston junior high schools, and he was a fun-loving, creative soul who knew how to enjoy every moment of his life. He was my greatest influence to become a teacher. Here we go. He inspired self-confidence in his students as he taught them the intricacies of the shop, especially electrical wiring. And many evenings, I hear, he returned home talking to himself after enduring their frustrations over poverty, broken homes, and low achievement. You all know what that means, don't you? They were antsy. Well, I spent summers with him all my growing up years, and I remember in my 9th summer when I arrived early enough to go to his junior high school graduation exercises. And we entered a hot, dank auditorium in a gritty school situated in a congested urban neighborhood, and I was scared. Most of those students were male, and they were very big. But as we moved through the crowd, Grandpa was flocked by these smiling giants who teased him about his date for the day and about whether he liked their latest shop projects or did their creative wiring shock him. He joked back and warmly patted shoulders as we threaded our way to a front row seat. He was a good teacher and a good man, and could I ever be as good a teacher, I wondered. I would never have time to be as good a teacher as Grandpa. If practice makes perfect, I never even came close. For sure, however, I had fun in classrooms, especially at Boston Avenue School where I taught mentally challenged children. Now, Grandpa was into fun. He provided plenty of it for me, my sister, and my mom. Time with him in New England was spent traveling around the Cape's beaches and parks, exploring New Hampshire's lakes and mountains, and seeing movies, public parks, and museums in Boston. His enthusiasm for nature and cultural activities tops anything in any of the field trips I took as a student growing up. A thrifty New Englander, he often joked about how my sister and I thought money grew on trees. One summer, he decided to increase our excitement about summer vacation by creating a money tree. He took weekly pictures of a tree branch anchored in plaster of Paris to which he affixed coins dipped in different colored wax and tied with a string. A snapshot every week arrived in Maryland where my sister and I sweated in anticipation of our impending millionaire status. As the branches filled out with the fruits of his labors, my sister and I dreamed of popcorn and movies, hot dogs on Nantasket Beach, and big ticket items in museum gift shops. Of course, to spend any of the money, we had to chip away the wax that enclosed us, enclosed the coins. Clever Grandpa. He knew that job would keep us quiet and out of his hair for a little while. When he wasn't creating art, Grandpa wrote. He loved to journal, and so did I. He filled binders with accounts of his travels with family and friends. He encouraged my mother to do this when she was a child, and so I spent many summer days reading and giggling over the entries in their journals. When I was 11, I began to journal too, and some years have been more productive than others. But right now, I have more notebooks full of my scribbling than I should confess to. My journaling provides me a great way to pay attention to my life. It gives me a good laugh to read some of these entries, and causes me pain to read others. But healing happens when we pay attention to our lives, the good and the bad. And I thank Grandpa for drawing my attention to journaling. Grandpa journaled after he was too sick to hold a pen. He detailed his dying experience at age 84 by way of a tape recorder Mother set up for him while he received 4 months of hospice care in her Orlando home. His voice sounded tired, but his enthusiasm for his family and friends and his gratitude for his life fills every tape. For lessons in compassion, patience, love, and laughter, I look to memories of George Crabtree, who always had stories to share, love to give, compassion to spare, and belly laughs. Always belly laughs. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Judy. Let's see who's next. Fred.
I never really knew my grandparents. Two of them had passed away before I was born. My grandfather on my father's side was a cotton farmer in North Carolina. I was 7 years old when he passed away. And my grandmother on my mother's side was pretty much an invalid the entire time I knew her. She passed away in the 50s. The person, the elder who probably had the most influence on me was someone I never met. His name was Phil the Bobbian, and he was a columnist for the News Journal. His light writing style inspired me to go into journalism, to write, and it's hard to express the influence that he really had on me. I enjoyed his writing thoroughly. He was down to earth, humorous, compassionate, whatever the subject called for, he was right on the money. And I tried to mold my writing after his. I think I did it fairly well, and I will be forever grateful to Phil, despite the fact that we never met.
Thank you, Greg. Tracy? That's Tracy.
Oh, so it does.
That's Tracy.
Come on, go and see it.
The great big giant poster is in my way. We'll see if I can hold it together here. Some of this I did find while I was putting it together, but some of this is actually excerpted from things that I stood up and said at the funerals of these two people, and so I may lose it, we'll see. I was lucky enough to know 3 grandparents, 1 step-grandfather, and briefly even 3 of my great-grandparents. All of their stories are fascinating. Today I'm going to talk about my mom's parents because they lived nearby as I was growing up, and I was always very close to them. They were worth knowing, and I hope you'll ask me to tell you more about them during a future conversation. Their names were Helen and Jim. I'm going to start with Jim. If you looked up the phrase tough act to follow in a dictionary, you might see a picture of Jim. He served in the Navy in World War II and was called out of the reserves during Vietnam for his expertise in explosives. He was a captain of the Grand Rapids, Michigan Police Department. He was a Navy medic who later qualified as a registered nurse. He trained as a pilot. He was a Navy SEAL, later applying that skill set to help the Grand Rapids Police Department form a needed underwater division. He was a draftsman, designing, among other things, the shoulder patch worn by Grand Rapids police officers. He earned 3 college degrees in 7 years, a bachelor's degree in business systems, a master's in criminal justice, and a second master's in education. He then taught college and lectured at both the FBI Academy and the Bramhill Police College in England. He learned and taught jiu-jitsu and judo. He created the first computerized data system at the Grand Rapids Police Department in the early 1970s. He designed the security system for the Amway Grand Plaza Hotel, a luxury high-rise in downtown Grand Rapids, and was on call there for visits from then President Ronald Reagan, Henry Kissinger, and others. If Jim had been the only man to live during his lifetime, it still might have been the greatest generation. You might get a picture from all of that of a big, fierce, chiseled super soldier. In fact, Grandpa's first application to the police department was rejected because he was a half-inch too short. And he sustained a serious back injury in the war from which he was told he would never recover. Stubborn old mule that he was, he just exercised religiously every day, and you would never have known he had any problems. He had 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters, and as infants, all 4 tended to prefer his gentle cuddles over those of any other available adult. He had an imaginary dog, and he put ketchup on everything, despite the fact that my grandmother was a brilliant cook. Old military habits die hard. He was surely the toughest guy I ever met, but also the gentlest. Now let me tell you about Helen. Like all the best grandmas, Grandma Helen was all about food. Her barbecued ribs fell off the bone, and her coleslaw was legendary. She didn't like chocolate chip cookies, but she'd make them for you, with or without nuts. She wouldn't eat lamb or veal because it was somebody's baby. She made waffles and bacon for breakfast when you stayed over, but it all had to be well done and crisp because that was the way she liked it. And she knew what your favorite thing was, Coke or licorice or potato chips or grape soda, and if it never came out of the pantry except for you, there was always plenty when you were there. You might get a picture from all of that of a little Mrs. Santa Claus sort of a grandma, short and rounded in flowery dresses with a fluffy apron and half-moon glasses. In fact, Grandma Helen, back in the day, was a torch singer. Lovely to look at, said the newspaper ads for Club 21, accompanied by the Dyke Lamoureux Orchestra, along with the club's good food, chicken, steaks, and spaghetti. I'm sure her sequin gowns and sultry vocals offered a welcome escape from the wartime headlines. As a grandma, she kept her figure, always had perfect hair and makeup, loved her blue jeans, and drove a bright yellow Chevy Camaro. She made up songs about Mr. Thunder and Fluffy the Squirrel that she'd sing to us whenever we needed comforting in her beautiful, deep voice that we loved long before we ever knew that she'd done it professionally. Her grandchildren were her biggest fans. If you find me to be smart or articulate, it is because my grandfather was a skilled debater and my grandmother an avid reader. If you find me to be courageous or tough, it is because my grandparents built up my confidence with their own unshakable faith in me. If you find me to be gentle or loving, it is because my grandparents were unfailingly generous, infinitely kind, and perhaps most important, madly in love for every precious minute of 55 years. My grandmother insisted we always say grace before meals. As I leave you, the words with which she always closed that prayer seem appropriate. God bless our babies, our grandmas and grandpas, and all the people who have no one to pray for them. Amen.
My grandfather was a journalist. His name was Albert Herbert Milligan. He wrote for the Boston Globe, the Portland Press Herald, and the Biddeford Daily Journal in Maine. He was known for his nature stories, which he wrote for the newspaper, and also he was known for his photography, as he took pictures of all the local basketball teams and football teams and so forth. And not too many years ago, I think it was 3, the local museum in Sago, where he lived, had a showing of all his pictures and some of the articles that he had written, which just, I was amazed when they wrote and asked me about him, because to me he was Abbott. I couldn't say Albert evidently, but he was my Abbott. And he was a small man. He always wore his hat and his top coat, as they did in those days. And I would get up in the morning, because we all lived close together, and went over to Abbott's house, and I would walk with him to the bus stop. And spring was a special time for us, because at the bus stop, there was a house on the corner, and the man grew the most beautiful tulips I've ever seen in my life. And there would be all kinds of varieties and colors and shapes. And Abbott and I just loved looking at the tulips and seeing how many different varieties we could find. I would also meet him at the bus stop on his way home from work. And he had a little song that he sung. So my musical talent comes from him, I think. His song went like this: uh-huh, 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 never bear.
I like it.
So he was a very quiet man, but he was very special. He really, I think he's the one that taught me the power of loving. He had an office in his house. It was a big Victorian house, and on the second floor was a room that had the high table like the Fords used to have in the day, I guess. And it had a telephone on it with the, you had to hang the hook up on the side of the phone. You had to give the number vocally. It was no dials or anything like that. And he would do a lot of his writing there, and I loved to go up there. And I would ask him if I'd say, Abbott, will you draw me a picture? And I'd sit on his lap, this big desk, and he would always draw a picture of me in the barber chair, because my mother made me go to the barber shop to get my hair cut. And I didn't really like it, but it made it a lot more fun when Abbott would draw pictures of me in the barber chair with various looks of disdain on my face. So it wasn't a spectacular relationship, it was just a loving relationship. We loved to be together. Unfortunately, my grandmother didn't have the same feelings or share the same feelings as my grandfather. And when I was born, because we lived across the street from them, probably so my grandmother could control her son, my grandfather would go over every day to see me, and finally she made him stop because she said he was going to spoil me rotten and nobody would want to be around me. So he had to stop those little visits. But as soon as I got my legs going and I knew my way, she couldn't control it any longer. He was a wonderful man and more talented than I ever realized. And I always will remember him with great love and fondness.
Let me move these socket and tissues to one side here. Liz, there will be no more hiding your singing talent under a barrel or a bushel basket. We've seen what you can do. There's a place for you in an upcoming program, okay? I was very fortunate to be provided 2 sets of wonderful grandparents who added to the quality and texture of my life. And the sets were mixed. My mother's parents were rock-solid, working-class people who were as self-supporting as they could be throughout their entire lives. My grandmother made ceramics, and my father was a butcher and a creamery owner. My father's parents were the exotics in the family. With the dramatic name of Molly O, my grandmother spent some time in her 20s in pre-communist China, working for an American businessman. My father's father was a serial innovator and entrepreneur, always launching a new business, usually failing, but trying again and again. He was involved with the founding of Motorola, but bailed quickly. It's been decades since his death, and I'm still a little irritated with that decision in his life. I believe I could have learned to live gracefully with independent wealth. My mother's parents lived in Iowa and then in northern Arkansas until they died. Visiting them was always a joyful experience, including all of the fishing. The last leg of the journey was a ferry boat ride across the lake, and I was always certain that the ferry would miss the dock and result in a tremendous crash, but it never did. When we were within 2 or 3 blocks of my grandparents' house, which was a Quonset hut of all the magical things, my siblings and I would beg our parents to let us out of the car so we could run the last 2 or 3 blocks. There was a line of Lombardy poplars trees on one side of the Quonset hut. Now, why do I remember that? I still miss them, and I remember them fondly. My father's parents were a little more distant emotionally. I have very little in the way of coherent memories of my grandfather, because dementia had begun to claim his mind before I was really old enough to have any distinct memories of him. On more than one occasion, however, my parents would strive to convince me to have as many conversations with him as I could while he was still coherent, and I did, and I shared what we could. My father's mother lived in Miami and was considered the reigning queen of the interior design business down there. She had many exotic friends, some very, very wealthy, and visiting her was always an adventure. On one occasion, she and I took a cruise to the Bahamas, and we had a wonderful time. Now, those are the notes that I wrote, and after I finished them, I looked over them, and at first I was a little disappointed, because the whole idea is about life lessons, things learned, and I wanted to be able to get up here and say, yes, I learned some very, very important things from my grandparents, like never running with scissors, never let the dog lick your face after he's licked, well, never mind. But that didn't happen. That didn't happen. So I looked at their life in a different perspective, and looking at the totality of their life, there were 4 people who were kind and compassionate, and lived their lives with honor. This didn't happen when I was practicing. And chased their dreams. And what finer legacy than that could I ask for? Now, does anybody else want to rescue me up here? Do you have reminiscences? Anybody else? They don't have to be long, they can be short. Any takers? Okay. Thank you. It is now time for the 3rd and final song. which I'm tempted to give a very, very long introduction for. Very long, until most of you have to leave. Because performing for the first time ever in public, I will be accompanying this song on the hammered dulcimer. I'll remove the sacred dragon cloth. This is what a hammered dulcimer looks like. I this from the back. And I am going to be providing the accompaniment for this. The words will be up here. You're going to be doing the singing. I'm going to be doing the playing. I'll get a lot of positive energy coming from you to make this work, okay? Now Judy's job, I'm going to play it through once, and Judy's job is to let you know when it's time to stand as you are willing and able.
I can stand.
Hazen, one more time. Need to extinguish the chalice. Or not. Juliana, would you like to extinguish the chalice for us? It's very easy to do. Judy will help you. It's very easy to do. There's a switch on the bottom.
One right in the middle, one right in the middle.
Well done, well done. Please return to the seat. We have a chalice extinguishing reading on the board. Thank you. The sounds of joy